Joey Gallo.
Welcome into the NSFW Dynasty podcast. Unfortunately, our co-host Joey Gallo could not be with us tonight. He had some parenting items that had to pop up today. We're both dads here, so we understand kids have their own schedules that we have to abide by. But I'm here, Dave Reed, still, and joined by my co-host Ryan Wilkinson.
Yeah, good to be here 2 days away from the start of the season. We've been podcasting for months, so it's nice to finally get to the actual season, have some real content to talk about. And Joe, we miss you. We'll have you on the next podcast, hopefully. But like Dave said, can't control kids, so we understand.
And fortunately, Joe was actually able to record some content that we'll be including into this pod as well. So even though he's not physically or digitally here with us, we will still feel like he's part of the pod. But yeah, finally, we're going to get some real content, no longer making things up to keep you guys engaged. So we're very excited about that. But if you've been listening to all the episodes, as I know you have been, because you are loyal listeners and you don't have a choice since you're in the league, we did our own power rankings of the league to start the season. But now that there's been real football played or preseason football played, a lot has changed in our views of these the players and all the teams in our league. So we figured it'd be time for a power ranking update. So with that, Ryan, why don't you give us a quick update of what your power rankings look like and any big movers?
Yeah, so I took a look at my rankings, and honestly, I was pretty happy with them. I like where they're at. I kind of want to see how it plays out. So I only really moved one team, and that is Team Schluter. I originally had him at number 9, but I moved him up to number 4 to start the season. Looking at his team more, I got to admit, I think Lamar Jackson is going to have a big year. Kirk Cousins is definitely a very good, serviceable fantasy QB this year. I actually like Cam Akers more now than I did when we drafted. I think he has a chance to be pretty good this year. He was on fire to end the season last year, and if that continues, he could have a big year this year. He also did add Stevenson in the trade from Sean and I, who we drafted, and I do love, add in A.J. Brown. So he's up there in everyone's rankings now, and I do think he competes for a title this year. So I had to move him up to start the season, but everyone else I want to see. My own team, I'm a little more nervous about. We have Terry McLaurin as our top wide receiver. He injured his toe, hoping it doesn't linger too long. But we do still have Allen and Hurts. So when I looked at John and now Pat's team, as well as Scott's teams, I still think we could take them. Scott has Cooper Kupp and Jerry Jeudy both dealing with injuries now. I have Cooper Kupp in a different league, and I'm very nervous there. So that's where I left my rankings. So to run through them quickly, I still have Matt and Dan at the top, Kropa at number 2, Kapfer and Mike Williams at number 3. I moved Schluter into the number 4 spot, Harrison and Dan at number 5, Dave at number 6, Joe at number 7, Adam and Katz at number 8, Canellis at number 9, kept myself and Sean at number 10, John and Pat at 11, and Scott at 12.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see our power rankings begin to align now that we've seen players and our perception of these players are starting to align more based on the football that we're seeing on the field. And I'll get into my rankings in a second. It is interesting to see that both of us have potentially all 3 hosts maybe missing the playoffs. So that means you're only going to get better rookie content later in the season. But moving to my rankings, my top 3 remain unchanged. I have Schluter in my top spot, Matt and Dan Rosinski number 2, Canales number 3, Crope making a big leap up to number 4, Adam and Katz up to number 5. I myself slid down to number 6, Kaffer and Mike Williams up to number 7. Harrison DaCosta slid down to 8. John and Pat made a little leap up to 9 out of the bottom spot. Joey Gallo moved down to 10. Ryan and Sean Wilkinson slid all the way to 11. And Scott hit the bottom of the barrel at number 12. Um,
I wish I had Joe here to defend our bottom rankings here, but I had a feeling it was coming from you. I knew you didn't love the trade we made and were much more of a Stevenson fan, so I had it coming.
I mean, I get it. I get the move. Your team definitely in moving. I guess for my bottom movers first. Obviously, your team took a tumble, but your team is clearly now playing for the future. It looks like what you're setting up with, which I agree with. You have a foundation in your two quarterbacks that are utterly elite with Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. No one can compete with that. It's just that after that, it gets rough. It's like, as you mentioned, Terry's hurt. Tony is always hurt. Mike Williams is sure to be hurt soon. Jameson Williams is hurt and can't rehab with his team for the next 6 weeks. So, like, the wide receiver core, at least for the current year, is looking a little rough. Madison and Rashad White, they're like in the QB dead zone. I mean, RB dead zone, where like they could be good. They could lose their job later this year or next year. So, a little tough to feel super confident about them. Um, and the rest of the bench leaves a little bit to be desired. But again, QB's figured out, and you got 2 first-round picks, I think, next year. So it's a little overwhelming the amount of holes they got to fill, but you got the resources potentially to do it. So,
Yeah,
but the current look, yeah, little risky, so it took a stumble, but you're still ahead of Scott.
that is
Um,
true. That is
so
true.
Scott, I was optimistic about his team in my last ranking. But and that was mainly because of the skepticism around his quarterbacks, and that situation has slightly improved. Where Jimmy G and Tannehill, both their roles actually look pretty secure this year, and he even has rookie Clayton Tune, who might get some starts at the beginning of the year with Kyler out. But after that, he had a lot of advantages at all the other positions that with due to injury and depth and like competition from other recently signed free agents, it's those early season advantages seem to be going away. Cup and Judy both are dealing with hamstring issues, which always have a high chance of re-injury. Kittle has a groin injury. Brees, who's recovering from ACL, has to deal with Dalvin Cook now, and even James Conner, who not hurt, but and should get all the touches in Arizona, but who cares when you're on an Kyler Murray less led offense that's going to be sputtering early and often, probably get a number 1 pick next year. So I just think at full strength, yes, he can compete with anyone, but unfortunately, he is not at full strength, and I think he's going to have a lot of struggles going forward. For some big movers, try to get a little positive there. I got a little bad taste in my mouth after those. Got Crope, who I had lower my rankings, but that was because I had a lot of concerns about how many players on his team you had to project to take a step forward this year. But this also was made before the Kelsey news, who hyperextended his knee earlier today. Does sound like his ACL is okay, and it should only be a couple weeks, but we still haven't got the full picture on what happened there. But assuming he's okay, I think his team is going to really make some noise this year. I still don't love that he has the whole Eagles running back room and Swift and Penny, or at least the running backs that apparently you don't want. Gainwell gets the hype as the lead dog there. But I have risen a bit on Amari Cooper. Calvin Ridley looks like that dude who's like he used to be this preseason, so I'm actually rising big on him. Jordan Love actually has looked very solid and should be a good QB2. And even Van Jefferson, who was a late round pick, with the Cooper Cup injury, should be getting a ton of targets going forward, at least in the first half of the year. And I got to give some props to John Clark and Pat. I was very critical of their team. They were in the bottom spot in my initial rankings. But even though I don't love Ken Walker, I still think he'll be solid. But I have gained a lot of confidence in Dameon Pierce based on his usage this preseason. Even though, and I no longer think Singletary is going to be that much of an issue. Debo should get a ton of looks now with Kittle dealing with a groin injury. And James Cook is looking like a prime breakout candidate. And Pickens is got to be one of the biggest ADP risers based on the highlights this preseason alone. Still think he's got a lot of depth issues, but overall, I think he's got a lot of youth on his team that have a lot of upside and can continue to ascend up the rankings.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, like you said, our rankings are definitely more in line than they were initially. I had Crope at number 2, and now you've moved him up, and I had Schluter at number 9 and moved him up, and you always had him at the top. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, we're all on the Schluter bandwagon. I think even Joe had him. And once Joe gets his final updates, we'll flow that into our league doc, and we'll have an updated consensus rankings that the league can all look at and see how they're trending. But with that, as we mentioned, the league the start of the league is only 2 days away. And with that, we wanted to call our shots with some bold predictions. And honestly, when you're in your drafts, like in the mid to later rounds, you're kind of making bold predictions anyway. You're seeing a path forward and try to buy into a narrative you believe in. That's what bold predictions are. So we thought it'd be fun to announce some of ours and maybe get some of the other league mates involved as well. And with that said, one of the first bold predictions that we're going to bring up is from Pat Saucier, who's the co-manager and brother-in-law of John Clark of the team I just said got a little boost in my power rankings. Yet he couldn't figure out how to record his audio and send it to me, so I'm going to have to read his bold prediction. And his bold prediction for their 2023 season is Michael Thomas, wide receiver of the New Orleans Saints, will reach 1,000 yards receiving in his first healthy season since the melee of injuries dating back to 2019. He's been getting rave reviews throughout training camp and preseason and believes he is finally 100% healthy with no setbacks and looking like his old self. Derek Carr is going into the season highly motivated and will support more than just Chris Olave in fantasy and Michael Thomas. The return of MT is here. Even though my velvety voice read that bold prediction, please don't believe that I believe it.
Yeah, I mean, the key there is first healthy season. Hasn't happened since 2019, so maybe it happens this year, but I think it's a big if. I do like Derek Carr, and I do think it should be a good passing offense. And if he is healthy and does play the entire season, it could happen, but I don't personally see it happening. And sounds like you don't either, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, I understand. There is definitely a world where this does happen, and I know a lot of people have been buying into it. I can't get myself to do it. Like too many times in the past, and I've done it myself, where there's been a player who used to be a stud and is hurt for multiple years in a row. 1 year is fine, but multiple years in a row, I just never see those players ever return to form. It's like just such, in my opinion, bad bet to make. I also love Chris Olave, which even though I understand both can coexist, I want to give all my love to Chris Olave. I don't want any MT in my life. Give me Olave. I have no shares of him either, and I've been trying to get some.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say the same thing about 1 year injury. Maybe you see people come back from that, but for him to return to form from 4 years ago is a pretty big if. He's 4 years older now too, so it's bold for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I'm a little burned by Michael Thomas. I drafted him in the first round a couple years ago while I was in the delivery room with my first son about to be born. That is commitment that we have here, and he played like a game for me. So I never want Michael Thomas again after that. But speaking of being in the delivery room, our next bold prediction comes from Matt Brzezinski, who actually just welcomed his second child in Cooper only a couple days ago. So we want to send our congrats to Matty before playing his bold prediction.
Yeah, congrats, Matt.
And with that, take it away, Matty.
Hi guys, this is Matt from Dan's team, and my 2023 hot take for the NFL season is I believe that Josh Allen will be outside the top 5 in final QB rankings at the end of the season. I think contributing to that will be a combination of him continuing to play injured and banged up throughout the season. Will correlate to an increase in more turnovers for him, and I think that will result in him being outside the top 5. I do believe he'll be a top 10 quarterback, but I don't believe it will be a top 5 quarterback. And if I had to take a bolder prediction, I think the top 5 quarterbacks for the season will be Mahomes, Hurts, Burrow, Herbert, and Lamar Jackson. And that's my hot take for the 2023 season. I wish everyone good luck.
All right, thank you, Matty. But I don't know, Ryan. I don't know how do you feel about these coming after your boy?
Ooh, yeah, feels like a personal attack there. I think it's pretty clear he must be sleep deprived over there with the newborn
Right.
son. But yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't agree. I'm very high on Josh Allen this year. I think he's going to be right up there with all 5 guys that he named in his top 5. Do also have Hurts, so I'm glad to hear he has Hurts in his top 5. Sounds like number 2. I don't know. I think it's bold to say Josh Allen is not going to be there. I think he definitely will.
I mean, I love Josh Allen as well. So it definitely is bold. He's universally a top 2 worst, top 3 quarterback pick early rounds. So yeah, we'll have to see how that one plays out. But that's what makes it bold. Moving on, we got Scotty Rapizzati, who I think might be from his giving us his bold prediction from his pool, but let's give a listen.
All right, boys, here we go. It's the Scotty Rapizzati. While you're all sitting around talking about my team and trades and working the waiver wire, your boy here is sitting in the pool, 85 degrees, cigar in one hand, beer in the other. Y'all just working the waiver wire. Season hasn't even started, and you're real nervous already. But here's the bold prediction of this upcoming season. The Pats finish last in the division. You want to know why? Mac Jones, dog poopy. Here's the second bold prediction. The Bills don't make the playoffs. Yep, you heard it here first. The Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen do not make the playoffs. So bold prediction number 1, Mac Jones, dog shit. Buffalo Bills don't make the playoffs. Boom.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I feel like he obviously has the same thinking as Matt there. I mean, I will say I agree with one of his bold predictions. Definitely not a fan of the Pats, but I don't know. I would definitely be very shocked if the Bills missed the playoffs. I think that's honestly even bolder than Matt's prediction because, Matt still had Allen potentially in the top 10, and they could still make the playoffs with that. But for them to not make the playoffs would be a shock all around. So that's very bold.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it is a competitive division over there, but in the AFC East. But yeah, I mean, the Bills are constantly a Super Bowl favorite, so to miss the playoffs altogether, I mean, that's what you want to hear in some bold predictions. Ones that make you really gas your jaw drop a little bit. Plus, gotta respect the picture that Scotty painted in his backyard right there, man. I really wish I was hanging out with him there.
Yeah, I know. I love that part of it. Anywhere you can give a bold prediction from poolside, you're clearly thinking straight. So I get it.
Living life. Love it. Now, moving forward, our fearless co-host, Joey, was able to submit his bold prediction. So let's give a listen.
Hey, guys. My bold prediction for the 2023 NFL and fantasy season is that the Green Bay Packers will win the NFC North and Jordan Love will be a top 12 fantasy quarterback. First, the division. This is as much a fade of the other teams as it is a pro Packers take. Starting with the favorites, I'm nowhere near sold on the Lions, a squad that gave up the 5th most points in the league last year and is still quarterbacked by Jared Goff, who has been inconsistent throughout his career, to say the least. Now, admittedly, they did improve the defense, specifically in the secondary in the offseason. They have a lot of youth on the defensive line, and these guys are in position to take a step forward this year, and they did add Jahmyr Gibbs, an offensive playmaker, in the draft. But that being said, I am still not sold, and comparative to Green Bay, I think that you could make the case that each of the position groups of the Packers is just as good, if not better, than the Lions. So, and as for the Bears and the Vikings, the Bears were the actual worst team in the league last year, and I think we still need to see if Justin Fields can produce on the NFL field in the same way he produces for fantasy. Will he take that Jalen Hurts leap for real football? I mean, we know Justin Fields. He runs, he'll be a beast on the fantasy side, but I don't know that it's a guarantee that he'll take the same leap that Hurts did in terms of translating to wins and losses for his team. And Minnesota, the handicap here is really simply that they won a historic number of close games last season, and regression is likely coming for them in that area. So now the Packers, in addition to what I mentioned earlier, I think they have the best head coach in the division. They have a strong offensive line. That will enable them to continue to be a force on the ground where they have 2 strong running backs. I mean, Aaron Jones is coming somewhat close to the age cliff, but he still seems to have some juice, and I am not a huge A.J. Dillon guy after last year, especially his yards per carry numbers were not really anything too special, but these are backs that can get the job done behind a strong offensive line that they have. The defense is strong in the trenches, and I really think that Jordan Love is going to surprise with how functional he can actually be. I mean, if you look at his numbers in the preseason, he was 21 for 33, so 63.6%, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. He rushed for 33 yards on 4 attempts. He didn't get sacked, and he was throwing almost 6 yards. I think it was 5.8 yards per attempt. So all of this, I think his athleticism, mobility, and his speed and rushing ability will make him a serviceable quarterback for the Packers in a very underwhelming division and a surprisingly strong fantasy asset. I think that he will carry guys like Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs to strong fantasy years. So I think that the Packers offense is actually going to be more fantasy relevant than folks think. So Packers, I think you can get them plus 300, plus 250, plus 350, something like that to win the NFC North. I think they and the Bears are kind of, depending on which outlet you're looking, tied for or kind of the same price in the highest price to win that division. So there's my bold prediction.
All right. By the way, Joey's eventually got to get a gambling offshoot of this podcast because
I know
it's a prize.
I love the stats coming in. Yeah. I like it. I mean, I don't think that it's super, super crazy. Obviously, they're not projected to win it, but I definitely get what he's saying about the Lions. I could see that happening. I like the Vikings, so I'd be shocked if the Packers finish ahead of them. And then I've been saying it all along, I'm not a huge believer that Justin Fields is going to take that leap. So I don't think the Bears pose any threat, really. So I could see that one happening.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I mentioned earlier that I think Jordan Love has looked pretty good and could be a solid QB2. And who knows, maybe he gets a little bit more touchdown upside and ends up in that top 12, as Joey mentioned. That division is definitely one that I don't have confidence in any team, which means that I think I could see the Packers potentially take it out. The Vikings, as you mentioned, they won I think 7, I forgot the exact number, but absurd amount of one-score games. And the chinks in their armor kind of showed in the playoffs when the Giants, my Giants, who were elite, obviously, but they were the underdogs and came out and beat the Vikings and then looked horrible the following week. But we don't talk about that. But yeah, and then obviously it's hard to just have faith in the Lions, who I think might be one of the favorites to win the division right now, just because of the Lions. I don't know. There's certain teams that you just in franchise you just never feel confident about, and the Lions are one of them.
Yeah, I agree. Like Joe said, they had a good year last year, but a lot of close games. So, like you said, no, I don't think anyone has extreme confidence in them to repeat. So,
yeah, and they had a lot of blowout games because their defense was horrendous. So it's hard to consistently win if you can't stop the other team. But moving on to my bold prediction. So, generally in fantasy, we typically target players on good offenses, which makes sense. Strong offenses typically rack up more yards and have more scoring opportunities. Well, this season, I've found myself continually targeting players from a particular team who last year finished 23rd in total yards per game and 26th in points per game. The stink around the Steelers offense has gone too far, in my opinion, and I implore you to take advantage of the discount on the Steelers offense with my bold prediction of the 2023 season, which is the Pittsburgh Steelers will have a player finish in the top 12 in each of the 4 main positions: wide receiver, running back, tight end, and yes, even quarterback. So let's run through these positions and see if I can get you to buy in here. So first one, the easiest one, tight end, Pat Freiermuth. He is currently drafted as the number 9 tight end. He finished last season as the tight end 8. And it honestly doesn't take much to finish as a top 12 tight end fantasy. It typically comes down to a couple touchdowns. You simply need to average, I think, 7.5 fantasy points per game to sneak in. So if you catch about 60 balls, 650 plus yards, and around 4 to 5 touchdowns, your odds of being a top 12 tight end are pretty good. And pretty much most people in the industry, and I think many of us believe that the Muth will get that and potentially even surpass it.
Yeah.
You buy into Muth, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's already being drafted there, so I think he's expected to finish in the top 12. So that one makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, and if something happened to him, have you seen their rookie Darnell Washington? Guy is a mountain of a man. He's 6'7", 264, absurd body control. I think he'll probably get like 5 touchdowns this season alone and low usage red zone package role. So like if something happened to the Muth, I think Washington could maybe have some touchdown upside and maybe keep my prediction alive. So I have a little insurance policy there.
Yeah, like you said, it doesn't take much to finish as a top 12 tight end. So
Exactly. So not bold yet. So let's move on. Let's see if we can get a little bolder. Running back. This one still not that much of a stretch. We got Najee Harris. He on average was the 10th running back off the board, and it's usually based on his expected workload. Last year, many people viewed he had a down year, and he was still the running back 14. And this was mainly due because of the first 8 weeks of the season, he was dealing with a foot injury from the preseason. I don't know if everyone remember that. Everyone thought he might be missing time. He ended up playing, but he definitely was hampered by it. But then after their bye, week 10 on, or week 9 on, the last 9 games of the year, he was the RB6. Just the year before that, he was the RB4. So clearly I'm projecting that the Steelers' offense are going to improve. So that would only benefit Najee. Now, again, if something were to happen to Najee, if you listened to the pod last week, you know that I'm a big Jaylen Warren fan. He's my main buy in Dynasty. And if something were to happen to Najee, say he had an injury, I think Warren would step in and be a top 10 back immediately. I think even with Najee, he's going to put up low-end RB2 flex numbers. And both these guys are excellent pass catchers. And in fantasy, with running backs, you look for that because the reception is worth more than a rushing attempt. And that only raises the floor and both the ceiling for Najee and Warren.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people do kind of seem down on Najee, so I get where you're coming from there. And I think a lot of that comes from people are actually high on Warren. So, if you're high on Warren, then you're probably a little lower on Najee. But like you said, he's done it in the past and recently, and he finished the year strong. So definitely see him finishing inside the top 12. So I think that one's definitely got a possibility.
All right, so let's see if we can get bolder.
Maybe bolder.
All right, let's get bolder. Let's move on. Wide receiver. Now, this is just a touch bolder. Deontay Johnson and George Pickens, they're both being drafted on average around 35 and 31 in the wide receiver position, respectively, on Sleeper. It's generally a toss-up between who goes first in your draft, which makes sense because last year, Pickens was the wide receiver 37 and Deontay, wide receiver 39. But I see a lot of upside here. First, let's talk about Deontay. Last year, he didn't score a single touchdown on 147 targets. That is some Jacoby Myers type stats. It's just comically unfortunate. The previous 2 seasons, though, in 2021 and 2020, he had 8 and 7 touchdowns, respectively, and he finished as the wide receiver 9 in 2021. So you already know he's capable of finishing as a top 12 wide receiver. The guy is just so good at getting open, which leads me to his counterpart, George Pickens, because this guy cannot separate if his life depended on it. But it doesn't seem to matter because he just keeps making insane catches over defenders in tight coverage. Every week, I've said this multiple times, there's a new highlight catch. And although I prefer my wide receivers to show the ability to get a little space from defenders, which generally leads to more targets, clearly Pickens is one of the elite circus/contested catch receivers in the game right now. And he has gained the confidence of his quarterback, who has not shied away from tossing them up to him. Reddit is already enamored with Pickens, and apparently Kevin Clark of The Ringer is too, because he claims he's the best wide receiver in the NFL, like the best, which is just an absolute absurd statement to make. Whatever it takes for some clicks, I guess. But no matter your stance, no matter your stance, though, the Steelers have 2 very capable and talented wide receivers, and I don't think it should shock anyone if one of them ended up in the top 12.
I like it. I actually like Johnson more. I think, like you said, he had 0 touchdowns last year. There has to be some positive regression there. And if he just catches a few, then he's obviously going to finish quite a bit higher than last year. Top 12 is definitely pretty bold. Neither one is being drafted anywhere near there. So if that one comes true, then you're going to get some great value in drafting either one of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I like Deontay more over Pickens. Pickens is more of the highlight reel, but I've been trying to get Deontay in our league. Well, I tried to draft him, and then Cannell sniped me, and I've been trying to trade for him ever since. I currently have an outstanding trade that Cannell is still looking at. I hope he accepts, but if he hears this pod before he does, probably is my last chance.
I was going to say, you just killed your trade because he's going to hear you and know how much you want him now.
It's the downside of having a pod, but you know what? I'm not going to hold back. I'm not going to spur any narratives in my favor. It is what it is. I want Deontay, and I expect a big season out of him. But finally, see how bold we can get. It's quarterback. This is where it gets bold. Kenny Pickett is coming off the board as in sleeper as about the quarterback 22, and often he's undrafted. After last season, he finished as the quarterback 28 on the back of 7. Let me repeat, 7 passing touchdowns. He did add 3 more on the ground, but 10 total touchdowns does not exactly inspire confidence in this prediction. He never scored more than 20 points in a single week, and he had a touchdown rate, which is the percentage of your pass attempts that results in a touchdown, of 1.8%. The league average is typically 4.5%, and 5+ being a very solid mark. So, yeah, things were bad last year.
Yeah.
Have I sold you? Now, what does it take, I guess, to be a top 12 quarterback? Well, on average, you have to average nearly 17 fantasy points per game. This generally requires for pure pocket passers to have about 4,000 yards passing and about 30 touchdowns. However, we know rushing quarterbacks provide so much more value by racking up points with their legs, which lowers the bar of what you have to do through the air. Pickett isn't exactly known as a running quarterback, but he also showed a good amount of mobility last year with 23 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns in really 12 games, omitting the ones that he got hurt. So I think it's pretty safe to say is a solid baseline of 300 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. If he hits those marks, then Pickett only has to throw for 3,500 yards and 25 touchdowns to be knocking on the door of the top 12 finish. Can he do it? Well, I just laid out that he has 2 excellent wide receivers, a top 10 tight end, and another potential freak of a tight end TD threat in Washington. And he has 2 extremely talented pass-catching running backs. He absolutely has all the weapons to get it done. And you know what? This preseason, if you've been watching, he looks really, really good. So I'm all in on the Steelers this season. Feels like there's been a discount on them all draft season, and I say that you better scoop them up and enjoy the ride. So that is my bold prediction for the 2023 season.
That's a bold one. I'll give it to you. I think the first 3 could happen, which, by the way, love the 4 bold predictions in 1 bold prediction. You know, Dave Reed, love it. Yeah. Love it. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not sold on Pickett. I mean, I think you said he has to go from 7 passing touchdowns to about 25. Pretty big jump for me. I don't see it, but I think he could definitely.
It's like a 350% jump. It's fine.
I can see him making a jump. I don't know if he makes that much of a jump, so we'll see.
All right. Well, you know what, Ryan? Take us home. Why don't you give us the last bold prediction of the pod?
So I'll go last, and you're going to love this bold prediction anyways, so it's a good one to finish on.
Why do you think I made it last?
Yeah. So my guy's currently being drafted as the number 11 quarterback. He finished number 9th in fantasy points among all quarterbacks last year. This year he gets upgrades at wide receiver and tight end. Some would argue pretty massive upgrades. I think he's improved as both a passer and a rusher over the last few years. So my bold prediction for this season is that Daniel Jones finishes as a top 3 fantasy quarterback. So I know you're going to love that. He rushed for just over 700 yards and had 7 rushing touchdowns last year. And we know, as you said, rushing quarterbacks have a huge advantage for fantasy purposes. For comparison, Josh Allen, who you know I'm super high on, he rushed for 700 yards and 7 touchdowns last year as well. So the knock on Jones is obviously the passing ability. He threw for 15 touchdowns last year, which is not great. But if you just add 5 touchdowns to that, he would have been the number 5 fantasy quarterback last year, tied with the same number of points as Justin Fields, more than Trevor Lawrence, Geno Smith, Kirk Cousins. Only Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, and Burrow would have had more points. I think he easily adds 5 touchdowns this year. The addition of Darren Waller is obviously huge, and there's been a ton of hype on him. And if he's going to be, I think he's coming off the board in most drafts as the number 3, at least the number 4 tight end right now. If he's going to be that, tight end, I think it's going to come from touchdowns, and I think Jones is going to see an uptick in touchdowns. So if people are believing in him, you got to believe in Jones a little bit. Obviously, the Giants are all in. They gave him a massive contract, 4 years, $160 million, $82 million guaranteed. He has Barkley, who had a resurgence last year, so he has the run game to rely on. Jalen Hyatt, Paris Campbell as well. I think it all falls into place this year, and I think Daniel Jones finishes as a top 3 quarterback.
I love it. And honestly, too, another little tidbit, they just restructured his contract, so I think it freed up $6 to $7 million. So they might make another move at some point this season. Hopefully, I don't know, maybe I'm putting it out there. Mike Evans, excuse me. Give me Mike Evans out of Tampa Bay for someone who's not a slot receiver on the Giants. So that would be even a better chance to be a top 3 quarterback. So I love it, Ryan. I love it.
I knew you'd like that one. So. But to be clear, he's not knocking Josh Allen out of the top 5 like Matt thinks,
No. but it's going to be Hurts, Allen, and then DJ, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Nice. Well, those were our bold predictions. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and thanks to our league mates for sending us yours as well. That was awesome. And before we sign off, kind of a bold prediction is kind of picking your fantasy MVP of the year, or MVP of the NFL season, whichever way you view it. So it's always hard to predict who you think's going to do it, but I figured it'd be fun for us to kind of throw it out there. But so, Ryan, why don't you tell us who your MVP is?
Yeah, so I'll go first because I really didn't go too bold with this. I was going for who I really actually think will be the MVP at the end of the season. When you initially asked, Josh Allen popped into my head, but I think that's just wishful thinking. I don't actually think he gets there. I think it starts with Mahomes. If you're going to talk about the MVP, then Mahomes is always in the running. He's there every year, and unless something crazy happens, he'll probably be in the running again. Although with the news of Kelsey, maybe that does put a little dent in his chances. Who knows? But the guy I actually am going to go with is Joe Burrow. Not a bold prediction, but I think he puts it together this year. He's obviously been there these last couple of years, and I think he actually takes it home this season and wins the MVP.
Awesome. Love it. I think that's a pretty solid, safe one. He's got a lot of weapons as well.
Yeah.
All right. And Joe, as if you were here, I'm going to toss it over to you. Who is your MVP?
Hey, guys. So for my fantasy MVP, I'm going to the mid-rounds and going to select Jahan Dotson. I think Jahan Dotson is going to be one of the top 5 to 10 wide receivers by the end of the season, total fantasy points, and you're getting him at an extreme value at his current ADP. The handicap here is really simply that not only is Dotson an incredible player who showed a ton of skill last year and a great deal of promise, he's in a situation where Sam Howell has impressed me in the preseason, and even if Sam Howell struggles, I have a lot of confidence in Jacoby Brissett, who was sustaining Amari Cooper to, I think, like wide receiver 5 overall through the first 8 weeks of last season. So I'm confident in the quarterback play. I'm confident that they're going to need to score a lot of points because their defense is not great. And the fact that Terry McLaurin already is dealing with injury in the preseason, and turf toe is notoriously an injury that lingers for a while. This could be a situation where if Jahan Dotson's getting, 10, 12 targets a game, I think that he's going to be as close to a league winner as you can get at that round, that part of your draft. So Jahan Dotson, my fantasy MVP for 2023.
Yeah, I think that's a popular one. He's been flying up draft boards. I think a lot of that does have to do with Terry McLaurin getting injured, but yeah, he seems great. So I think he'll definitely have a good year.
I love him. I have him in a few other leagues. He just always seems to get open. I'm also a big Howell guy. I have been since last season in Dynasty, and I made sure I got him in this league. Dotson is the only regret in the startup job. I did take Trey Lance right before him. Obviously, mistake looking back on that. I thought Dotson would be a little overlooked and I could get him in the next round, and he was the immediate next pick after that. So I've been letting that down every single time I look at Canales' roster, who, as I mentioned, sniped every young wide receiver from me. But no, I love the pick. I think Howell will support him. And yeah, I hope so, because that means my other teams will be doing well. So for me, my fantasy MVP is obviously Trevor Lawrence. No, I do think he's actually going to be in contention, but really, I'm going to have Darren Waller, and you kind of touched upon it before. Am I biased? Yeah, maybe. But everyone wants to have positional advantage at tight end. It's why Kelsey used before the injury news that broke today, was going in the first half of the first round. Mark Andrews almost never made it out of the third round. It's because it provides such a huge advantage every single week. But you have to use such high draft capital to get those guys. And I truly believe Waller's going to dominate this year as the number one target. I mean, Andrews is the number one target for the Ravens, and Kelsey is for the Chiefs. Waller is that for the Giants. I could easily see him finishing as the tight end 2 this year. And one of the biggest reasons why Kelsey gets that bump to the first round is that last year he scored 100 more points than the tight end 2. That was an additional 6 or so fantasy points per game. So not only will Waller, I think, finish as the tight end 2, I think he's going to close that gap significantly, where Kelsey, yes, has the fantasy points per game advantage, but I don't think it's going to be as drastic as it was last year. And you're getting Waller in the 5th, sometimes 6th round. So you can scoop up a lot more value in those first early rounds and then still get a premium advantage at the tight end position a little bit later. So that's why I think he is going to put up Kelsey-like stats and be your fantasy MVP.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I do think he makes a jump and is up there with the Kelsey and the Andrews this year. Obviously, I just did my whole spiel on Daniel Jones. So if he's going to be a top 3 fantasy quarterback, then Waller's probably going to be on the other end of it. So I like
Ryan's in. You heard it. Ryan is in on my MVP.
I'm in on it. I like it.
I love it. Well, this is our first pod under an hour. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This was a really fun one. And honestly, guys, 2 days and we got real football. What do you think, Ryan?
2 days. Can't wait. It's going to be fun. And yeah, we're excited to do this throughout the season for you guys.
Oh, yeah. Get ready for more frequent pods coming up in the fantasy season. Thanks again, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
NSFW Dynasty podcast. Tune in next time.